Hello. We're
Hello.
here today with Rebecca, and Rebecca is a professional organizer. And I invited her to have a little talk about um, as dyers, we have this tendency to have a huge collection of all kinds of things with fabrics. You're looking right now at closed cupboards, and I'm not going to open them because things will just fall out and attack us. Um, but I'm hoping we're going to get a few good tips here about how to organize our stuff, all our things, all the things we need. Rebecca, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
All right, so I'm Rebeka Saltzman. I was inspired in 2012 to quit my job as a designer and become a personal organizer because I read the book Zero Waste Home. And I just felt like, gosh, I need to make a difference in the world. I need a job where I can, you know, make people's lives better. And so I quit my job and I started a company. And I haven't looked back, and I love it.
Very
I'm Yeah, I moved to Israel in 2014 with my family, and we're super happy here. I love it. And I just, I don't know, I love my business. It's called Balagan Be Gone. Balagan is the Hebrew word for chaos, so chaos be gone, right? And it's just an amazing feeling to be able to make such a big difference in people's lives by helping them curate the best collection of their stuff and minimize all the things that they don't need in their lives so that they can easily access the things that they do need.
Okay, well, this is very relevant for most of us, I think, that are visiting the website, because I will talk about myself, but and I know my situation is even like I'm kind of like self curating. You have visited my home once, you see, like I'm less is more for me. But even
Yeah,
then,
you're on track.
yeah. So even then, I have this large collection, I would say, of loose dye powders and mordants, and it's all like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And it's not that I don't want to throw it out; I need it all. So,
Right.
uh, what would you? How would we
So you
start? Like,
need to make it work in space.
yes, would you
Okay.
advise to store this in glass or in plastic or in bags? What would you advise me to do?
Okay, so first I want to say that in organization, it's a journey. Like it takes time to figure out which systems work best for you. And sometimes you might try a system and you'll be like, well, this doesn't work. And
Mm-hmm.
other times you'll be like, yes, this is the way. And I have found the roadmap to lead me to organization. So it might take a little bit of trial and error to find the right system for you. But here's my feeling. In general, I find that plastic bags are not helpful because what happens is the bags are not always large. Sometimes they're small, especially if we're talking about remnants in that kind of
Yeah.
situation. And the bags are small and they get like stacked on top of each other. And then you can't find the one that you're looking for. So in my right, and this is true, by the way. This carries over into the kitchen, in the pantry. If you buy things in plastic bags, it's worth it to decant them and put them in containers, because the containers, especially if you're having containers that stack and can be placed on top of each other or lay out neatly next to each other, the reason for this is because if everything is in a container and the containers are all the same, visually, it's easier to identify what you have, because the external factor of organization is uniform. So what I mean by that is, if everything is in the same type of container, your brain is able to recognize other features, and it helps you with ease in terms of picking what you want, because your brain can see, oh, that's the color, that's the texture, that's the amount that I'm looking for. And when it's in these plastic bags, first of all, everything is like dumped on top of each other and they can't stack, and it just ends up being like a big pile of stuff that you have to sort through all the time, and that's a waste of time. but if you have everything in organized containers, it makes it easier to see everything, and the uniformity makes it more clear. This helps us in the long run because it minimizes our decisions. So we're able to clearly see like, oh, I need this one, and we could just take the one we need, and it allows us to be more clear in the creative process later on.
So you are saying that uniformity is minimizing our choices,
our decisions.
our decisions. That's very interesting. I've never thought about it that way. So would you say also this is correct for doing like some kind of uniform labeling system? Would that be also something?
Yes, 100%. 100%. In fact, I just had a podcast about, my podcast is called Journey to Organization. I just did a podcast episode called Decision Fatigue. And the thing is especially for creative people, I mean, people are making 3,500 decisions a day. And that's a lot when you think about it. And the decisions can be as small as, do I move my hand this way or do I move my hand this way? You know, and like those decisions, they're not conscious decisions, but they're decisions and we have to make them. And so when we're able to minimize the chaos around us so that the decisions are easier to make, yes, then it allows us to be more creative. It allows us to suffer fatigue less, and it allows us to make better choices more quickly.
Very interesting. This is very, very something that I should think about, and it encourages me to remove more.
Well, okay, so I understand that I went to art school. I understand that in the creative process, you need a lot of supplies. I totally get that. So while I'm not necessarily encouraging decluttering in the studio per se, I do think it's important. Like, for example, if you get a new brush to replace an old brush, then get rid of the old brush. Like anything that's replacing something else, the original needs to go, because if you're buying something to replace something else, like why are you keeping it? Does that make sense?
Yes.
But so in that sense, decluttering is important. But for supplies that like, okay, maybe I can get a little bit more out of this dye, or maybe this fabric will be a good sample for me to send to people if I need to send fabric samples to somebody or whatever. I understand why you would want to keep that, but how you organize it is like the most important part. So how you organize things really depends on what you need to organize.
I see.
That's the first thing. But the idea of keeping more than you need, okay, yes, it's true. We shouldn't keep more than we need, but I hear the argument in the studio, I need that. So it's this fine line where you have to decide what you actually need and what you don't actually need. And sometimes it may take time to get to that answer. Sometimes it might be like, okay, I need to think about this. But if you're finding that you can never find a home for a specific object, then that's probably the thing that needs to leave.
I see. Yeah, I often like, it's not only that we are keeping like things that we may need to use. So we have, on one hand, we have like the supplies that we want to use, the supplies we may want to use. And then there's this, at least for me, there's this huge stack of tryouts that I feel that I need to keep because I want to document a certain process that I've done in learning and in developing techniques.
Okay, like making a class later on from it or something?
Yes, exactly. Like I need to show those. So right now, I can show, like, then there's this, hold on. There's these like stacks and stacks of shades of pink.
Right.
So, you know, it's, and then there's more stacks of things. So the least I can do is to make sure that they are all, can you hold on because someone is trying, I will cut this out. Hold on.
Sure.
I'm going to cut this out of the.
Okay.
Why in the world would anyone need to clean the air conditioning filter just right this minute when I'm having a Zoom meeting? It's just beyond me. It's beyond me. I have no idea why. Even keep this in just to show people that I have actually a normal life with normal problems.
I hear
So,
ya. I hear ya.
no, this is only for one shade, okay? Keep this in mind. This is only
Right.
one experiment. So I have like drawers of these. For me,
Okay.
what worked is to keep this in like I have a plethora of boxes for shipping, so I could just like keep them in these little boxes and then mark them on the top. But say, would you have like, besides ironing them and keeping them in more or less the same width, would you have another way of keeping this organized? Do you have like a magic tip for this?
Okay, so when I was in college, I did an elective in knitting. And we used to have to knit and crochet all these different swatches. And so I had two ways of storing things, and I found both of them equally as good. So it depends sort of what you like, and I would go back and forth between what I like. Do you know those binders? They're not really binders. They're portfolios.
Okay.
And they have like the hardcover, and then they have the plastic sheets that are attached inside.
True. Yes.
Okay. So I used to keep my swatches one on each page with the backing behind it. And then I would have like notebooks just full that I could pull off the shelf. And when I would put in a new swatch, I would put in a new swatch. And that's how I used to store those. The other way that I used to store them was with accordion folders. So I used to have these small, like half-size accordion folders, and the swatches would be like about this big. So I guess that's like 5 by 5, 5 inches by 5 inches.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many centimeters that is. Sorry. I'm American. Mea culpa. And I would just slot them into these accordion folders, and then I could also leave those on the shelf. And when I was ready to use them or swap them out for something else, I would just swap them. And what I found is that's really nice about it is that you can label, in either case, you can label the spines, like, so that you can clearly recognize, like, okay, these are my pink linen swatches, or, you know, these were like crochet or knit or whatever. And this way they are lined up neatly on the shelf, and they have a place. And I think if you leave here with nothing else today, the most important thing that piece of information that I can give everybody is that no matter what you decide to keep and what you decide to toss, everything that you decide to keep has to have a place to live. If it's important enough to keep, you have to give it a piece of real estate in your home, or else it's just going to flit around from place to place, and you'll never be able to really locate it. So if you can actually create zones of things, here's where my dyes go, here's where my mordants go, here's where my swatches go, here's where my finished products go. And if you can create zones in your studio, that's going to really help you, because you're going to always know where to look. And again, it's going to reduce the amount of decisions you have to make. It's going to reduce frustration, because you know, you're not going to be searching for the things that you need all the time. You might still a little bit, but
that completely makes sense. And it inspires me right now to have a new look at my things, that having like, you know, you add a little more, so I don't really have room on this shelf, so I'm just moving it to a different shelf. But then in the end, I'm just looking twice, because I'm looking and I have
Exactly. When I teach people how to move, I always tell them, I'm like, resist the urge to commingle things that don't belong together. Like, don't put your, you know, books in with your kitchen supplies, because the box is going to probably be marked books, and you throw in like a random kitchen supply, you're never going to be able to find it, because the books are like the last thing you unpack, right? So like, you're going to be like, where is that thing? I can't find it.
For sure.
So resisting the urge to commingle different categories is really hard, but I think that it's really important because it allows us to have these clearly defined zones that make things easier for us to see.
Now, we were briefly like touching the subject of like stashes of things. Now, let's say that I have already done I've already written my blog about this little stash,
Okay.
and these are all little pieces. It's not like I'm going to be able to make something out of them. Even if I wanted to, they're not big enough to make a bag
Okay.
or something. Unless I start quilting, which I have like I have
No desire to quilt?
no, not seeing myself quilting. So
Okay.
I think what I'm asking is like, when do you decide, okay, this I can part with this? Because like, for me to make these kind of samples, this is like 2 days work for me. And then I've lovingly ironed them, which is the only thing in the house I will ever iron is my samples. Nothing else gets ironed, but these get like all the love, and I do it. It's like very intentional. There's a lot of love poured into these pieces. So how would I be able to even say goodbye to these babies? How would I be able to do that?
It's hard, and it might take you time to get to that stage, because I think that what happens is when you have, once you start to get like newer, better samples, then you'll go back to those and you'll say, okay, I have this new thing and I need to make space for it. So I have to decide what needs to leave, because our space is not infinite. We don't have an unlimited amount of space. And so we have to make these decisions about what goes into our space and what leaves our space. But we can only, we can only have so much, because, we have a limit. And so you might find that right this minute, you can't make that choice because you're close to it and it's connected to you and it's love to you. But when you make something new, you might find like, oh, this new thing is much better. I now understand that I no longer need these objects. And so if you can give yourself a little bit of time, a little bit of distance to see sort of where you're going on your journey,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like we have to be like, I have to get rid of this right now because, the decluttering police are coming to arrest me if I keep something, right? This is, like I said, it's a journey.
Coming for a visit.
It's like we have to get to that space on our own, and we have to feel ready. And it's funny, when I'm decluttering with clients, a lot of times that they can't come up with a great reason to keep one thing, but they can't let it go. So I'll say to them, okay, if you're having trouble with this, then give me something else. So if you're having trouble with the pink swatches, let's say, then look to someplace else in the studio that you can remove and wait, because with time, the need to declutter will grow, and you'll be ready. Once you see you haven't used them and they're not going to be useful to you in your future trainings or your future techniques or whatever, then it'll be easier for you to move on. But right now you're a little too close to them.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Now, as you are talking, I'm thinking all of a sudden, I'm realizing like that perhaps also like space is very cultural defined, right? Because we are in Israel, which is, I don't know, super cramped apartments, like very, very limited space, and they have not heard of a garage. There's no such thing, at least not in the apartments that we live in. And whereas where I come from the Netherlands, for instance, my parents had this huge attic that I swear you could like take furniture out there for 3 small starter apartments without any issue. Like everything just got stacked into the attic. Which also
so that's not necessarily a good thing.
By the time they were moving, I think it took them about 3 months to declutter the attic. So my question is, if you have the room, say that you are living in, you are coming from America, right? Where I don't remember now exactly where you're from, but if I've seen like American houses, they have, well, a lot more space than we do. Does that make the need?
Depends where you live.
I see. No, not New York.
So I grew up, right, exactly. I grew up in a big house, not a big house, an average size American home in a suburb of Washington, D.C. in Maryland.
Okay.
And when we moved to Israel, I moved from New York City. And we were 5 people living in 2 bedrooms, and it was tight. So it depends where you live, you know, but here's the thing. Just because you have the space to store something doesn't mean you should store it.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Yeah, like, okay, great. I actually did a podcast episode about that also. Just because you have space doesn't mean that you can store things. See, here's the thing about space. The first thing about space is that when we have more of it, we tend to fill it. That's number one. So learn to be okay with the need to have empty space, because I think that empty space is just as important as full space. Like, to me, that's how like energy flows and moves in the creative process. I feel like you need that to move around you. And when you feel tight and cramped, it's hard to be creative. And you don't want that. I mean, I wouldn't want that, but maybe you do. But but I think that most people are able to be more creative, not when necessarily their space is super tidy, but when there's room to maneuver. Like, if you have space and you don't feel tight and closed in, it's easier to be creative. So here's the thing though, just going back to the space issue, I feel like if you have the space to fill, a lot of people, and this is true like in my family too, like my brother and sister are waiting for me to go and clean out my parents' house. And I'm excited to go and do it, but like, they can't do it. They don't want to do it, and they're leaving it for me. And I think about all the things that I could have gone through with my mother before she passed away. And I think like, what a nice experience that would have been for the both of us if we would have done that together, because at that time she would have said to me what's important to her and what's not important to her. And I would have liked to know that, because while I'm not such a sentimental person, so it's going to be easy for me to be like, okay, this needs to go to recycling, this needs to go to charity. Like, that part's not going to be hard for me. But if we would have done it together, we would have been able to have this experience. And then, you know, for me, it's not so much of a problem, but for like my siblings, if they wouldn't have me, for example, it's super hard for people to go through other people's stuff and clean things out. So I feel like if you can keep your stuff at a minimum now, it's easier for the people who love you just in case. Do you know what I mean? Like, maybe you'll have to downsize. Maybe you won't be able to make these decisions for yourself. So leave it in a place where if someone has to move you, they can. Do you know what I mean? And I think that that's a really important thing to remember. But there's also one other standard that I hold myself to, and that is what the Jewish sages teach us. That is, more possessions, more worry. When we have more things, we just worry about our stuff more. And what I feel like for me is that, and for a lot of people, is that when you are worrying about your stuff, it means you're not invested in the people who you are with, and or the art that you're creating. Like, if you're always worried about the stuff, then that's always what's in the back of your mind. And it's not, what's in the back of your mind should be, how can I care for the people I love? How can I create better artwork? How can I make the world a better place? But if you're always worrying about, this is broken, I have to fix it, this I have to polish, this I have to clean, this I have to send out for repair, whatever it is, like, that takes away our average functioning, and it means that we're less creative, And it means that we are less able to focus on people rather than things. And to
That is a
me, that
beautiful
is
thing.
like the most important part.
It's a lovely, lovely thing. I really
Thanks.
appreciate that thought, and it's motivating me to right now go and grab a bin liner.
You're like, okay, Rebecca, we need to pause. I have to go organize
I
right
have
this
to
second.
go get rid of some stuff here. Create space for that, for my flow to
Yeah.
my abundance to
But
flow.
it sounds like, you know, woo woo kind of thing, but it's really not. We need space to maneuver. We need a way to move. We need, you know, we need to just have this energy that can flow around us when we're creating. And I think that's really important. If you have a lot of stuff, the studio feels stifling.
Um, I have noticed that the more things I have, it's taking up headspace a lot.
Yeah.
So that is for me always has been part of a reason to get rid of things. And I do agree also with you too, that some things take time. I had this bag of indigo samples, and I was not, no, I can use this for lining, and they're so pretty, like they're still touching my heartstrings. But then 3 months later, I realized that really I was done, and they needed to go. Now I have also, lucky for me, I have a friend who does some like saori weaving, so she can
Oh,
always use, she can always like to give me your silk because she will put them in her works, so that's good. But even there, I would have like a bag of my scraps sitting next to the door for 3 months. And then I said, okay, listen, I'm going to have a cutoff. Either you're picking them up within X amount of time, because otherwise
right.
I'm just moving around these bags
Oh,
and they're
that's a big
still
problem
taking up
for a
my
lot
time,
of
because every
people.
time I see that bag, I'm like, oh yeah, she was supposed to pick them up and it didn't work out. So um, I am aboard the minimalizing train vastly. I'm really invested. But this has been a really great talk, and you've given me a couple of good things to think about. Now, let's say now we are deep in Corona times. Otherwise, we would have done this in situ, on the spot,
Right,
right? We would have not done this on Zoom, but
right.
we're a little bit limited. So are you also moving like your, do you find that you can do your work,
Online.
helping people to organize their things also online? Is that working well, do you think?
Yeah, actually, it's great. I've been doing, I have this product called the Done in a Day Declutter, where we spend 4 hours, and at the top of the time together, we figure out what you need to do and we make goals. And every 30 minutes, I check in with you and I hold you accountable so that you can hit your goals and your targets for the day. So we make like one larger goal, like this area needs to be cleared. And then I go through the time slot with you and I say, okay, here's going to be target 1, target 2, target 3, and target 4. And then I'm calling you every like 15 to 30 minutes, depending on what the project is. And I'm holding you accountable to make sure that the work is done. Other times people just want to talk about like general guidelines about what they should do in a space. And I do like those smaller consultations as well. I also help small businesses get organized. So I teach small businesses how to automate and streamline their businesses so that they can be more functional and spend less time doing admin stuff and more time doing stuff that they really want to do. So that's been a little bit of a twist that I've added to my business over the last few months. It turns out I really enjoy helping people with that. I love it. And in my own business, I made a lot of mistakes. And so the thing that I love about it is that I'm really helping people avoid making these mistakes that I made and that I learned the hard way, things how to do. And I had to search for all of these answers, but really I could save you so much time and energy and money up front right now, teaching you all the things that I did wrong. So, and the solutions that I found for these things. So yeah, you can reach me. You can reach me at Rebeka, Rebekah, at balaganbegon.com, BALAGANBEGONE. I'm sure that you'll post all the
I'll
details.
post it. I will put
Yeah.
the details beneath.
and you know, you can reach out to me and we can see how we can work together. And if you're not quite ready, I have a free podcast you can listen to called Journey to Organization. And I have a free Facebook group called Organizing in Israel. You don't have to live in Israel to join it, but it's a support group, and it's such a great space. Like, everybody's non-judgmental, and I show up in the group all the time, and I am always offering solutions, and the group offers solutions. And I think that that's the best part of it, is that you get sort of the hive mind. And because a lot of people have a lot of creative ideas, my word's not, you know, the last word. It's an important word, but it's not like, you know, sometimes people have other really creative solutions.
The group is really wonderful. This is where we meet most of the time, right? Because
yeah,
we know each other.
it's true.
Well,
because you're a master declutterer.
Yes. No, but I will add also that sometimes all we need to hear, and I find this also with my friends, when I help them like go through some decluttering a little bit, they just need to hear, like, they need to get some kind of reassurance that it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
Get rid of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because very often they also still come from a mentality where in the family it was considered wasteful to throw things out or to pass things along. And
right.
So to get this little, like a little bit of hand holding sometimes, just to hear from someone else that it's okay to let go of something is
100%. My feeling has always been that when things come into our life, they're meant to come into our life to be a blessing. But sometimes the blessing ends, and we need to pass that blessing on to somebody else. And like, whatever that object was meant to do, it served its purpose, and now we can give that blessing to somebody else. And if the item is used up, then we can dispose of it ethically. And I think that that's important. And I think a lot of times when people are getting rid of things, disposing of things is actually the problem. They're ready to let it go. They just don't want it to go in the trash. Right. And I totally hear that, and I understand that. But in most countries and most neighborhoods, there are real ways to dispose of things ethically. And if you do a little research, you can find them. And it might be a little more work to dispose of it that way, but in my opinion, it's worth it. Like, my kids, my son had a binder. I make my kids save all their school supplies from year to year. Yes. Because I feel like, why should I invest in new stuff when you have stuff that's perfectly good? But my son actually saved one binder that he didn't realize was actually broken, and the loops didn't close.
Okay.
And he's like, Mommy, this one, it doesn't close. It's really not useful anymore. I want to get rid of this one. I said, okay. So I started peeling back the plastic cover on it, and I separated it from the metal and the cardboard so that I could put the metal in one and the cardboard in the other. And then I threw the plastic part in the trash. And he's like, why are you doing that? I'm like, listen, it takes 5 more minutes of my time, and I'm being responsible for something that I purchased that, you know, I no longer need. And that's
a better
really
person
important.
than I am, for sure.
Okay, but so that's the thing. I have less stuff than most people. And because I'm not focused on my stuff all the time, I can focus on how to get rid of things ethically because I have less stuff. And so the stuff doesn't take up so much of my time. And so when I actually am forced to get rid of something, like, I would never have bought those voluntarily, but because they were part of the package that the school was requiring, I didn't really have a choice. So, like, what was I going to do? The teachers say you have to buy this one, then you have to buy this one. Like, sometimes I can put my foot down, but like, other times you can't.
That will be a whole different Zoom talk about Israeli school supplies. Lord. It's very special.
Listen, I think culturally, the idea of plastic is revolutionary here. And plastic definitely has a place. 100% it has a place. And it's useful. But I think we just rely on it very, very heavily. And I think that if we can cut our reliance on it a little bit, we'll all be better off.
I agree with you so much. For a closure, I will tell you a tiny experience that I had when we were traveling in France last year. This year I didn't get to go because Corona. Uh, and we were driving and I was like, oh my gosh, I want a coffee. There's this cafe over here. Can I just get a coffee? And I'm in my best French. I'm like, je voudrais un café pour prendre avec moi. I want a coffee to take with me. And the guy is looking at me. And then he looks at his colleague like, what does she want? A coffee to take? A coffee to take? No, ma'am. You're drinking your coffee here at the bar and then you leave. We don't have disposable cups. And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I don't need to use that disposable cup. I will have my coffee here on the bar.
You could take 10 minutes and enjoy a cup of coffee.
Actually enjoy it and not sit and try to drink this in a riding car. So
it's those little things that that's what makes life great.
Without it, yeah. Well, I'm sure that we actually will have a talk about that at some point, about all those other things that are not art stuff related. Rebeka, I want to really thank you for taking the time and having this talk. And I'm looking forward to see responses from the people who are watching this. I'm sure we'll.
Yeah. And I want to hear. Tell me what you think. I love the responses.
So people can post in the comments, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of friend requests now on on the Balagan page.
Hope so.
Well, have a great time, Rebeka. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye. All the best.